Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm on the road again, heading to pick up a little piece of extraneous stuff for, not really for the shop, but just to kind of help things along and create a little bit of space this winter so that I can get the Forsyth duster in the shop. But that's not really the whole point of this exercise or this episode. Exercise? Are we doing push-ups? I don't know. Anyway, let's watch the show intro and I'll get the fog out of my brain, and then we'll meet on the other side and you can just find out what this is all about. So I'm Mike and this is My Car's shop, or at least it's My Car's truck.
Working out of a 100-year-old refurbished barn, bringing 35 years of experience to projects considered beyond repair. Vision, creativity, and problem solving are essential tools in this place. Watch as we transform junk into polished metal miracles. This is My Car's shop.
So storage is always an issue, and I had actually been looking at some places to rent to store some cars this winter. And my buddy Dave mentioned to me that he had one of those little outside steel frame storage tent type building thingies, and that it was free to use if I wanted. So I'm heading to pick that up, and we'll get that set up so that we can get the 74 Duster put inside, and the 73 Duster can go in the back of the barn, and the 47 can be moved out from the back wall, and the Forsyth, well, there's just going to be cars moving around. We don't need to talk about all of that. That's not the point of what this episode is about. But what I really want to talk about today is, why is it that I don't do customer cars anymore? You've heard me mention on the channel several times that I rarely, if ever, do customer cars, but I've not really shared in depth the reasons why, other than I want to stay focused on my own projects. But there's a little bit more than that. First of all, you'll see that I help out my buddy Mark, and I help out John and a few other people because I don't mind helping people out, and that's fine. I always try to balance those things with making sure that I'm getting things done that I need to get done around the shop. Because really the focus of My Car Shop is the in-depth, in-detailed work that we do, especially when it comes to fabrication. And forgive me, I don't remember the name right now because I haven't really had my coffee yet today. But somebody made a comment on the last Challenger episode on stripping the deck lid that was really insightful and encouraging to me, and it was in response to my saying, I could go out and buy a deck lid, and he said, hey, that's true of a Challenger, but there are a lot of us that can't go out and buy parts for these cars, and the techniques that you're sharing help us all to learn how to salvage the stuff that we have. And that was like, I know that, but yet it was still encouraging to me to keep on the path that I am with this channel. Okay, I happen to be working on an extremely popular car in light of the 70 Challenger, but if you flip the coin and go to the other extreme, I'm working on an extremely, I won't say rare because it's not a rare car, but an extremely unpopular car that's very difficult to find things for in the 26 Oakland. And so I've gotten comments sometimes, well, why are you doing this, or why aren't you doing that on the Oakland? Well, some of it is you just can't get the stuff. In my travel here, I'm actually kind of taking a roundabout way to head over to the farm because there's a huge car show and festival going on in town right now, and I don't want to deal with that mess. I did think about taking you guys to the pumpkin show. I'm not a huge car show fan, I'll be honest about that. I rarely show cars. For one thing, I might have gone with John this year, but I don't really have a car that's ready to go. But I just don't find it a lot of fun to sit there all day and talk to people who, some of them are great, they're friends, and it's good to reconnect, but there are others who don't know anything, and I have to sit there and listen to stories about, well, my uncle had one of those cars. He had a 1966 Dodge Dart with a 440 Hemi in it. yeah, not interested. So, and that's okay if I'm in the right mindset, that works. But this little route takes us all around that and helps us avoid that. Anyway, get to the point, Mike. Good Lord, keep talking and talking. Why don't I work on customer cars? Well, as I've said before, I'm getting to the age in my mid-50s where I don't have a lot of time left to be doing this stuff. I recognize that physically, I'm probably not going to be like Gene Winfield, who's, I think, 90 and still keeps plugging away at this stuff. So I figure I've got another good 10 years, and I've probably got 30 years worth of work in the shop to accomplish. So there's that. And I want to stay focused on those projects, and I think those projects kind of become little hallmarks for the channel. But there's another big reason that I really haven't touched on, and that comes down to money. When you're restoring cars for people, it's very difficult, especially for non-car people, to understand just what it takes, how expensive it can be. Dad and I were talking about this yesterday working on the Oakland. It's been surprising to him that we think we know where we're at with the project, and then we run into something that was unforeseen, and there's another whole channel of expenses that we're going to have to do that we weren't anticipating. And boy, that is exactly the case when it comes to restoring cars. So you have the average person who buys a 70 Nova. We'll pick an easy car. And it needs a lot of work, and the engine needs to be rebuilt, and it needs some quarter panels put on it, and they bring it to you and say, what will you charge me to do this? Well, I don't know until I tear it down. I really don't know what we're going to run into. So, of course, easiest way with an engine is quote a crate engine. It's cheaper, but if it's a numbers matching car, that's not going to work. So there's that. And then rust. You know, what you see on the external of a car, it's probably 10 to 30 times worse once you tear into it. So I try to quote it at the 30 times rate. But at the end of the day, there's always something you run into, something you didn't expect, something unforeseen. By and large, everything is fixable. And when you're doing it for yourself, who cares? Fix it. But when you're doing it for a customer who has to write the check, it doesn't always work that way. So my rule of thumb lately has been, and I had somebody bring me a late 60s muscle car a while ago, brought it over, wanted to get a quote on what I would charge to paint the car. They wanted to do a color change, so we were looking at an engine removal, taking off all the panels, the doors. It needed quarter panels. And I looked at the car and I thought, I'm looking at 2 years of almost full-time work by the time I do, all my spare time basically on this car for 2 years. Can I do it? Absolutely. No problem. I've done a dozen if I've done one. But I thought, I don't want the job. But I also want to be respectful of another person. But I also know that I cannot set a price limit on this because, quite frankly, by the time we're done, we might have $50,000, $60,000 just in what I'm doing to the car. So my rule of thumb on something like that anymore is I need a $20,000 down payment, a deposit, and I need a blank checkbook that whenever you need something, you just write the check with no questions asked. Obviously, I didn't get the job. But quite frankly, that is the only way anymore that I would work on somebody else's car that wasn't a close friend. And that may seem kind of harsh, but I think a lot of you get it. If you've done this work, you understand. If you have to ask how much it costs, in many ways you probably shouldn't be doing it, or you should be doing it yourself, where you can cut corners and do things inexpensively and make your own stuff. And, it's an extremely expensive hobby. I have had a few customers in the past. Money was no object. They didn't care what it cost. They wanted it done. They knew I would treat them fairly, and I had a blank check. Unfortunately, one of those guys has now passed on. The other one has moved out of the area, so I don't get that work from those guys. But it's an extremely difficult thing because you don't want to offend somebody. And I always reference them to another body shop and say, really, I'm probably not the person you want for this. There are body shops in the area that can do the job that you want. I also want to say that is the purpose of this channel. If you don't have deep pockets, then this is the kind of stuff that you can do if you're willing to take some risks and try. Because if at first you don't succeed, you can try and try again. And hopefully with a few of the things you're learning here, and also a plethora of knowledge, and plethora is a big word, kind of like gymnasium, but with a plethora of knowledge that's available on YouTube, the guy takes his time and really does his research. A lot of this stuff you can be doing yourself and saving yourself a real ton of cash. I have to say also, I think I started to say this and then distracted myself. With the channel starting to gain popularity, I've been surprised at how many people have contacted me over the internet wanting to know if I would be interested in restoring, painting, whatever, their cars, because they like how I do things and they like the quality of the work that I turn out. Which is a little mind-boggling to me in some ways, because I don't feel like I turn out work that is, well, let's just put it this way. There are people out there who turn out way, 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 way better work than mine. I feel like mine is maybe slightly above average, but it's a little bit humbling, but by the same token, it's still sticking to the guns of, listen to that Hemi. Sticking to the guns of, I'm honored, but I probably am not what you're looking for. It is rather ironic. It's ironic, apparently. It's not ironic, it's ironic. It's rather ironic that I spent years building a reputation for doing show quality paintwork. And I think it culminated for me probably about 11 years ago. I had just finished probably painting that 35 Chevy. In that era, might have been that 73 Dart Sport. Cars turned out, it was the Dart Sport, because this is the story. And I'd worked hard building that reputation, and I really was locally getting a reputation for being able to turn out show quality work. And I was at a car show, and a guy had seen several of the cars. Matter of fact, it was this pumpkin show that's going on right now, 10, 12 years ago. And the guy had a Cuda there, nice, beautiful Cuda. And he said, I've seen your work, I know your reputation. What would you charge me to do a 70 Cuda, 346 pack car, the 344, I don't know, anyway, 70 Cuda that he had? What kind of cost are we looking at for you to do that car completely? And it dawned on me what I was facing for time. I was looking at, in that case, probably 3 years of my life consumed with doing this car because I was working full time. And it dawned on me in that moment, I don't think I want to do this anymore. How ironic that you spend years, a decade, more than 2 decades, working to build a reputation to get the work you want, and then you realize, I don't really want that. So I kind of hemmed and hawed around, and he brought out a photo album with a bunch of cars, and he said, and these cars on this page, I think he had 6 Barracudas, or Cudas and Challengers, E-bodies anyway. And he said, I tell you what, I will pay for all the materials, and you can take your pick of which one of these cars that you want to paint my car. Well, I'm like, oh man, I've always wanted an E-body. Yeah, this is going to be great. But I'm smart enough to know to say, let me get your information. And I took his card. I said, I'm interested, but I really need to think about this. I need to look at scheduling. I need to look at shop space. And just a lot of things I need to look at. And I also wanted to take some time and research the value of those cars. So I went home, talked to Becky about it a little bit, thought about it for a while, and looked at it. And those cars were bringing, I don't know, $5,000 maybe in that time, 10, 12 years ago, for a car unrestored. And they were all unrestored. And I realized, I'm going to give this guy a $20,000 to $30,000 paint job for a $5,000 car? I don't think so, Tim. But that was what kind of started the process of me realizing, at that time I had 4 cars. If I keep going the way I'm going, I'm never going to get these cars done. Now, I hadn't started my car shop at that point. That was only something that started a couple of years ago, before, like 6-8 months before the pandemic. Was already starting to do this channel. But it dawned on me that I'm not sure there's enough money to make it worthwhile, because at the end of the day, when I've done the numbers after restoring a car for somebody, Very rarely do I make a little profit, but by the time you pay the heat and the lights and everything that goes with it, it's really, really expensive. From the average guy on the street, I certainly understand the sticker shock of getting a quote on getting a car painted and finding out that your $99, I'm real shy about paying any car for $99. Those days are gone. You can't even buy the paint and materials to paint most cars anymore for less than $2,000. And I'm just talking the paint, the hardeners, the reducers, and the clear coat. I'm not even talking about all of the other materials that you need to paint a car. The days of the $1,000 paint job are long gone. The days of the $5,000 paint job are probably going quickly, although I still think there's probably, if the car's really nice and a shop is doing them relatively inexpensively, but I would think that it's not out of the question to say that to get a car painted from somebody else, and I haven't had one quoted in years, you're looking at 10 grand minimum, probably more now, and I'm still probably out of touch with costs. And remember, everybody that paints cars, they're not in it for fun. They're in it because they're good at it, and it's their profession most often. So I've done it professionally. It's been a long time since I worked in body shops, but and I understand that body shop costs. And I was just talking with Kim, whom I mentioned before, from Finish Line Refinishing up in Canada, about just how expensive products are getting and how crappy the materials are as well, because they keep reducing it for emissions purposes and making it less volatile, but it gets more and more expensive. And so it's an extremely expensive thing to restore a car. And that's why my policy anymore is, if you want me to restore your car, I'll require a $20,000 deposit and a blank check. Keep writing the checks until they tell you to quit with no questions asked. Now, you have to have the reputation of not ripping people off, and I know that because there are rip-off artists out there. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. On my way to pick up the storage tent, like I said, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you watching. I really appreciate you watching the show. Wow, if I could just speak English. If you haven't subscribed, you know the routine. Do that. Hit the bell so you receive those notifications. We are on those other social media platforms /mycarshop. And I would have to say there's probably only one thing we forgot. Rock!